Hey, what's up guys? This is Brian at Brian's Tech Therapy. This video will be a tech therapy video. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. Today we'll be talking about the realities of certain technologies, namely OLED. And its Achilles heel is not burn-in, it's not image retention, it's banding.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up guys? Thank you so much for joining me this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're watching this. This video is on banding and OLEDs, specifically or particularly larger OLEDs such as the one behind me. This is an 83-inch LG C1. I have a 77-inch A80J from Sony upstairs. And the reason why I want to discuss banding and why I've been apprehensive on doing this specific video is typically what I like to do in YouTube with these tech therapy videos is bring calm. And this isn't going to bring calm, but it will in one way to let you know that you're not alone if you see banding on your OLEDs. Now, there's only so many slides you can look at. There's plenty of OLED banding tests on YouTube. I suggest you check one out if you think you have banding, but I would tell you for the most part, you do. For the most part, anyone, especially with a larger panel, has some sort of banding on their OLEDs. Actually, of any size, you will have banding on OLEDs. I've seen 42, 48, 55, 65, 77, and 83-inch, and they do have banding. They're just not as noticeable at the smaller sizes. Sounds ridiculous. The more viewing area you have, the more you will notice it. But what really shows banding is content. And that's something that I want to talk about today, and I will show you at the end of this video. It won't be very long, where you'll see it most. And again, apprehensive on doing this. I've done videos on this in the past. I don't like fear-mongering. I don't want you looking for flaws. But there may be a time when you're playing a game specifically, or even when you're watching a movie, where you think you have a clean panel. It looks clean on all of your slides and all of your tests, even having the panel QC'd, and then you're watching a movie or you're playing a game and it's there. And typically you're going to see it in HDR content in a 5% gray or blue, or the combination of smoke, fog. Now, what's interesting about this isn't a new thing. LEDs also struggle with this. It's called jail bars, whether it's in between the zones. Many of you see DSC. Those are on LEDs. What OLEDs tend to suffer from is banding. And I see it at times. I personally feel it is an HDR issue. It is a content issue. The panels, for the most part, especially in black or near black, do fine when they are in that light gray, which unfortunately a lot of our content is in these days. I think HDR implementation is not great at times, especially in our games. Games like what's it? Stranglehold? Is it called Stranglehold? It's one of the PS5 games I feature. I'll put the correct name on the screen, is a lightish blue. And there's moments where you walk into a hallway and you turn and you can see all of the banding on the screen, and it's uniform for the most part. The panel behind me, again, 83-inch C1. In this room, we've had a 48-inch A9S Master Series, 55-inch CX, 55-inch C2, 77-inch A80J, a million different OLEDs that I've seen, whether it's at the store or at friends' houses. They all have some form of banding. Now, where I feel it's changed is in the last few years. If you watch, let's just say, SDR content, you'll rarely see it. It kind of reminds me of blooming with LEDs. If you see a lot of blooming in HDR, if you watch, especially in the black bars with your LEDs, watch some SDR and you'll rarely see any at all. Same thing here with OLEDs. For me, when I watched the OLEDs, especially back in the day, C7, C8, even the C9, they were always very guilty of crushing blacks. And even though people really complained about that, that was OLED's Achilles heel back then. burn in and crush blacks. For those of you that remember that, I actually preferred that. Yes, you lost detail. You never heard anything about banding on the CA. Barely any of it on the C9, but there was always the complaint of crushed blacks. Now there's so much better coming out of black. It's not really a problem. Shadow detail, you see the star fields on OLEDs have higher specular highlights than LEDs. They don't crush the detail where LEDs tend to glob it together because they can't control the light. However, in my opinion, that's where banding is now most seen. When I play games on PC that are SDR, no banding. Doesn't matter how dark the screen is. I'm just walking through, no problems. In HDR, in that 5% hazy, it shows up. Now in this video, I'll show you Modern Warfare campaign on the Series X. I've played the game before, and there's other games that I have mentioned even in this one. Deathloop Stranglehold. Deathloop is the name of the game. And I'm here playing it. I'm completely immersed, got the Atmos going. And as I get into, especially in the beginning of Modern Warfare, it's completely black. It's beautiful. Gorgeous game. The scene is in a cavern underneath, or it's in a cave. Kind of hazy. The whole screen has lines through it. And that's with a clean panel. The reason, again, it's not fear-mongering, is showing you the reality of the technology or the limitation of the technology. Now, you might be watching this and saying, hey, bro, I don't know what he's talking about. I have a clean panel, or I've calibrated it out. How come more reviewers do not talk about this? How come more professional reviewers don't talk about this? Well, in a way they do. However, the biggest reason is this. Most reviewers, especially professional reviewers, review 55-inch panels, 65-inch panels. It's a lot of slides. It is a lot of measurements, a lot of charts. Where this really shows up is side to side, meaning in gaming. When you pan, when you control the pan. In a film, you might be watching a ship cross a scene. You may see it here and there on YouTube in the menu, but typically it's when you are in a game, in a first-person shooter, and you're controlling the camera that it'll catch your eye. It's you moving the scene. Then you also have the game itself. The game may have a grain structure. It may not be full 4K. And that's another thing I've noticed is in native 4K, native resolution, it's not as obvious. So you're dealing with, this happened on the PS4 Pro a lot with LEDs and OLEDs, checkerboard rendering, then going with the screen, and it's in HDR. There's a million different reasons that come together to create this issue. What I'm trying to say to you is you're not crazy. And let's be realistic, a lot of the professional reviewers, the ones that I love and I watch all the time, don't really game. What they do is they take their tests for, and I'm not criticizing them, they take their tests for input lag, they run a couple titles, they're done. Those of us that game, especially in campaigns, that love the visuals, that walk through the environments and look around, that's when it's going to catch you. Now, I don't recommend you go looking for it, and I don't recommend you bring your panel back. You will bring back 5, 6 of these, and you will see some banding here, some banding there. You will see it on every one that you buy. Now, if you do a banding test in 5% gray, and it's still, and you see huge blocks, then that's a defective panel. That should go back. But when you see it in this one specific use case, meaning not one, but gaming, and then some panning at that 5% gray, that hazy smoke, that's when you'll notice it. And I'm going to show you that now on Modern Warfare. Now, the camera's going to exaggerate it, but what I'm going to show you is that in one scene, even a dark scene, it's nowhere to be found. A little bit of ambient light, flames, nowhere to be found. If banding was embedded in the screen, if there was a true defect, you would see it most of the time. And that's always the way it is with any kind of defect. You'll hear even ratings.com say that, or Vincent from HDTV Test, or Digital Trends. It's not noticeable in content. It's not really an issue. I'm telling you that this percentage of banding is noticeable specifically in certain games. Now, what does help it is having the blacks slightly crushed, darkening them a little bit. then you lose that shadow detail, but there is a trade-off. Nothing is perfect. But keep in mind, if you go larger, this will be more evident. This panel is 83, 77. So me having smaller OLEDs, I never really noticed it before or didn't notice it much. But I will say that on my CX at 55 and at 77, when I then went and searched for it, I could see it. I had a video on one of the scenes a few years ago for Modern Warfare where I thought it was only my 77-inch CX, and then I went and looked at the A9S Master Series and the CX. I got really close and I could see it. Pixel density is a factor on smaller panels. It's not as visible simply because of the size, and that's really all I want to point out today. You're not losing your mind, but I don't recommend buying these and then sending many of them back. Now, if you see huge stripes, again, in more than that small percentage of content, then that is an issue, and that would probably have to go back. Something that's blotchy. But I want to also kind of explain, this is where the therapy aspect comes in. There is no perfect panel. It doesn't exist. There is no perfect technology. Doesn't exist. You can get rid of an OLED and say, look, burn is not as much an issue. Image retention is still an issue. Maybe they're not as bright, though I think they're plenty bright now. Banding is more of a problem. Now on the C8, the C7, those panels from back then, where I noticed banding was off angle and a red and green. And you would see just hazy little bars. Dead center, you'd see nothing. And I have that on the channel maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't until they were better at coming out of black, wasn't until, and I wouldn't even say they're lifted blacks. It's just that transition. The process has gotten better. And I will say on the S95B, on the QD-OLED, I did not notice it on Deathloop and some other titles, but who knows how long those panels will last. If they're being artificially brightened, that would remove that as well. So maybe it's not an issue. Maybe it's not an issue with the new panel. I don't know. I didn't see it on the S95B, but I don't love the way they're updating that panel right now or changing the image quality. That's another video that we'll be doing next week on Samsung. But 12 minutes in, I will show you the footage. It's only a few minutes long, but it is a fact of life. It is there. Again, if you're saying to me while you're watching this, Bri, I have a clean panel, you're nuts. Awesome. I'm glad that you do. Don't look for it. Don't prove me wrong and then or don't try to prove me right, I should say, and go looking for it. The reason for the video is if you see it. Chances are you're going to be in a completely dark room. Should have mentioned that. I have a little bit of an ambient light back here, but I tend to watch games in a dark room. Will bias lighting help this? I'm not sure, but I will tell you that I play in a completely dark room. Atmos, I get completely immersed, and this is immersion breaking. How do I rectify it myself? Truthfully, being somebody who's around these panels, whether it's the ZX from LG, 8K TVs, I've seen them all. I just know it's a fact of life that I have to deal with. Sounds ridiculous, but I don't focus as much on it. It sounds ridiculous. You think about a camera where you go back a couple steps, whether it's aperture, but you click back. With how you start focusing at your TVs, you start pixel peeping. Just relax your eyes a little bit. Typically, that bit of content is quick. Don't focus so much. Like in racing games, when you're playing and you're moving with LEDs, you'll see the jail bars. Don't spend so much time looking off. Kind of focus on your game, enjoy it. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life, as I mentioned. It's only a few % of the content that you watch. But if you are a gamer, and I mention this again with those reviewers, they do not game the way we do. And one more thing about reviewing. And when we do our reviews, I don't do many full reviews. I continue covering TVs all year. The idea is to run numbers, run slides, run tests, give you numbers, and present it. The best way to see any of these displays is in content. in the films, the movies, the shows that you watch. Can show you demos all day. If copyright wasn't an issue, I'd show you movies. I'm able to show you this content now for Modern Warfare to illustrate the banding on this panel. And trust me, the banding in slides is virtually non-existent. Also, OLEDs do get better over time. With banding, it does fade out. They do even out. They do get better. LEDs do not. 15 minutes in, banding, it is a fact of life. I'll even maybe have some of the video playing in the background, but it is a fact of life. No panel is perfect. Just know if you go larger, it's something that you're going to notice, and it may be something you didn't notice before. And as always, don't go looking. You don't see it. I do not want you finding it. Trust me, when you get into these things, you cannot unsee them. I don't recommend you do that. All right, guys. Love you guys. I will show you the footage and I will talk over that. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, guys, here we are in Modern Warfare. As we begin, you'll see me walking into a darker area. It's not as evident here. Now, it's going to be more exaggerated on the camera, especially when I go into the calibration of the game. But you'll begin to see it here. It's a little bit hazy. Now, obviously, there's no blooming. That's just the way the camera is picking this up. But you'll see as I go into this area, you'll start to see a hazy line. There it is. You'll see more of hazy lines going up and down. You see how uniform they are. When I leave this lantern, it'll become crazy obvious. There it is. Now, if you look at where I am, that is similar to that 5% gray. Also, you add the smoke, you add probably not a native 4K image, you add also the screen uniformity, never going to be perfect. Even as I darken it, it does help it. Now, I will say, being in HDR, you are limited to the settings you can change. SDR, you can crush the black, you'll never see it. I don't see, there it is. See how bad that is? And this is on a clean panel. Just happens to be this specific game, this specific scene. And I'll illustrate that even as I walk out of that scene into this area, it's gone. Even though the area is dark. Now I'm back, you see it again. Again, look, hazy, light blue, grayish. Now, if we were in SDR, you drop the OLED black down 2 notches, it's gone. We're not an SDR. HDR does handcuff us by graying out those settings, needing you to be in HDR. Now we transition to this area, not as evident as I'm walking into the light, even into the dark section here. But when I turn and pan back to that smoky area, that's when you'll see the banding return. Again, showing you the different calibration. Now, you'll see this brighter than I will. I like to go to where that is barely visible. These aren't always accurate. In some games, they are actually broken. Call of Duty typically does a good job. Again, I'm somebody that's okay crushing the blacks a little bit as I like the contrast ratio. Now, you'll see it here as it basically disappears as I get into the lit area. And even then, we're not bad. Very bright. Also bright and dark. So we're clean. No problems here. Game looks beautiful. It's not like it's a bright area. It's dimly lit. The black level is great. Panning the camera, no problems. And even as I fall down this cavern, this is where I want to illustrate to you that you'll see it and not see it. As I get up and walk around, again, seems like a decent area, but look at hazy. And there it is. Now, when I meant about not focusing, not squinting so hard at it, it becomes less visible even as I watch this and I narrate it for you. Now, as you move into a better lit area, even with strong black levels, it's virtually gone. There is nothing. The panel is absolutely flawless. This is why it'll make you guys crazy and why the video is being done. It's the truth, the limitations, but so much of this, guys, is the content. It's the flaws in the content. It's the bit rate. And then here we are, virtually flawless towards the end of the game. You see me panning quickly, and even as I drop into a dark area, which I'll show you now, it's still perfect. Here we go. And even as I pan, nothing. There it is back in that bluish area, but it's only for a second. Now we get back into the campaign part of it. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Love you guys. Take care.